Hey everyone, Kirby Fan here, and after the last spotlight took a good 55 minutes of your time, we've got a much shorter one today. I hope you enjoy this one, and as always, don't forget to leave a comment voting for the next copy ability to Spotlight. Voting will end on May 25th, 2021, so if you're watching this video after that date, or you don't know what you want to vote for, you can leave a comment by telling me what you think about water and poison. It doesn't matter if you're talking about the real life or Kirby in this case. While you're at it, if you enjoy the video and want to help out, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. Don't forget to ring that notification bell too, so you don't miss a single upload when they happen. Doing all of these things is great for the channel, and I really appreciate it. With all of that said, let us move on to the spotlight. Life-giving water. Nectar of the gods. No, not that! Water hasn't been around for a very long time, but it's certainly left its mark. As it is, fans had wanted it to appear in a game ever since it showed up way back in the early 2000s. And while it looks very different now, it's still the same thing. It's water. As for poison, it was in Planet Robobot, and that's all about there is to say about it. You don't hear people talking about it nearly as much as you do water, or even some of the other minor abilities like Archer. But as we've shown plenty of times in these spotlights, popularity, or lack thereof, doesn't always translate to how good or bad an ability is. Are these two as fresh as a glass of water on a hot day, or as toxic as poison? Let's find out on today's spotlight on water and poison. We start with water's debut appearance, Kirby's Return to Dreamland, where, you guessed it, Wing outclasses it. Water's got some pretty good movement, but Wing, as I'm sure you're used to hearing at this point, is superior. And that being said, should you remove Wing from the picture, Water has a good amount of tricks up its sleeve. One of the more well-known traits of Water is that, while you're dashing, you can not only hurt enemies, but also move over water. While the dash hurting enemies isn't a very big deal, at least for this game, we'll get back to that later, the moving over water thing is a really nice perk. No other ability can do this, and most abilities that have aerial dash attacks likely won't be able to make it over the gaps of water without falling into it, slowing you down. Water is also able to dash over lava. While that's certainly a little more situational, many other abilities still struggle with that. By itself, this gives Water some of the most consistent ground movement in the game. What's even better than Water's dash, though, is its dash attack. This is one of the most ideal dash attacks for any ability to have, as it not only gives Kirby a big boost in speed, it also deals enough damage to deal with most normal enemies in the game. This means that you can plow through most obstacles while keeping your momentum going. Even on water, similar to the normal dash, it's all a win-win. It being a dash attack, it also has tons of invincibility, so it's pretty risk-free. It's strong, it's fast, and it's easy to use. What can't it do? You can't use it in the air. That's kinda rough. Yeah. It's the main thing that holds Water back in general in Return to Dreamland. It's limited aerial movement. Not saying that everything has to be Wing necessarily, but Kirby levels aren't your standard platforming fare. You need to move up a lot, and when you look at other abilities that can move around quickly, such as Fire and Tornado, they have options to go quickly in the air. Others that don't, such as Parasol and Cutter, have much stronger dash attacks, which allow them to keep moving at a faster speed. They're also better against the bosses, which we'll get into in a bit. Still, when looking at the bigger picture here, Water is a great ability for not only traversing over ponds and lava, but also for breezing through levels on the ground. It has other moves, but outside of bosses, you don't need to worry about most of its moves at all, except for the dash attack. This is definitely one of the best moves in the entire game, and it's really hard to imagine Water working without it. As for the arena modes, I told you we'd get back to these, Water is, unfortunately, very average. Unsurprisingly, the dash attack is an excellent tool here, considering the speed boost helps against some of the more mobile bosses, and the damage it deals is rather good too. Unlike your standard Return to Dreamland ability, however, Water actually takes advantage of a few other moves in its kit. The standard projectile, which is Wave Attack, is a quick attack that deals reasonably good damage, working as a good way to start some fights, or a way to kill mini-bosses if the dash attack isn't your most effective option. Rainbow Rain, Water's charge attack, is the general best damage dealer versus the bosses. It has a very big hitbox and deals really good damage in general. The standard rule of thumb is if a boss is moving around or pushing you away, you use the dash attack, which is called Wave Surf, by the way. I just realized, hadn't mentioned that yet. Sorry. And if a boss isn't doing that, it's best to use Rainbow Rain to deal big damage. If they're far away, but really close to dying, Wave Attack is acceptable. While water itself wouldn't appear again for a while, we did get intoxicated with an ability very similar to it in Planet Robobot. That being... really hope you'd be able to figure this part out. Poison. Right off the bat, Poison loses points for not being able to dash over any kind of water or lava. I don't think that niche would really matter nearly as much in this game, but for stuff like Overload Ocean, I could see it helping well enough. The regular dash also doesn't deal any kind of damage to enemies in the front. Rather, it leaves a trail of poison behind for enemies to slowly suffocate on. Kind of pointless if enemies are typically in front of you, but hey, if it's a death by poison you want, you got it. Similar to water, Poison's major selling point is its dash attack. Concerning the levels, none of its other moves were really designed around doing anything effectively. Instead, Poison is designed around dealing damage slowly with attacks that leave lingering effects that can kill enemies if they walk into anything. And while it can certainly be fun setting up toxic smogs and watching an unsuspecting and pretty dumb, let's be real here, random enemy walk right into it, there are far better ways to deal with bosses, the levels, and normal enemies themselves. The dash attack, however, does show some promise. It looks very similar to Water's on the outset, and it has Poison's standard trait, where it leaves behind some lingering goop to finish off any enemies it couldn't outright kill. Sure, it can't go over oceans and the like, but this still counts for something, right? The answer is... kind of. Yeah, it's a dash attack that gives Kirby a boost in speed, and those are always going to be helpful. The damage on it is pretty good too, and it grants Kirby the same kind of invincibility that Water did. There are some problems though. First of all, it has the same flaws that Water's does. Namely, you can't use it in the air. Even ignoring the fact that this game has a somehow better than ever jet in it, that always stinks. But the real problem is that Planet Robobot simply has more abilities that can do things compared to Return to Dreamland, and Poison doesn't stack nearly as well against those. Regarding movement, of course there's Jet, but returning abilities such as Fire, buffed abilities such as Cutter, and damage dealers such as Hammer all outclass it. On top of that, Planet Robobot has two more ways for abilities to stand out. There's the Code Cubes, similar to the Sunstones from Triple Deluxe, and the Robobot Armor. Poison does not have a Robobot ability, so that's knocked out right there, but there also aren't any Code Cubes that require Poison either. That's a pretty small niche to have to begin with, all things considered, and it can't even fill that. All Poison really has going for it is an excellent dash attack, and while it's still very good, so many other moves have either been added or changed since Return that I can't really call it one of the best moves in the game anymore. For the arena modes, on the other hand, things are drastically different. Poison goes from an ability that slowly kills things to an ability that very quickly kills things. It struggles against some bosses, in particular being bad against the Susie and Haltman duology, but there's a ton of fun to be had with Poison anyway. And Spotlight veterans know exactly where I'm going with this, but for the unaware, we need to talk about how bosses take damage in Kirby games. In older games, such as Superstar and Superstar Ultra, bosses have set periods of invincibility after getting hit. Bosses such as Wispy and Dedede took a while, but most had a pretty normal feeling cooldown period. Return to Dreamland changed it to where bosses had a unified, very short period of invincibility after getting hit. The point being, it was still there. Triple Deluxe has some specific changes, but for the sake of the video, it was largely the same. Starting with Planet Robobot, boss invincibility was removed entirely, meaning multi-hit moves deal far more damage than they ever have. And what is it that Poison has? It's really cool to look at an arena run with Poison, since there's bound to be a bunch of stuff on screen all at once. The Toxic Smog is kind of a given, but as far as dealing good damage goes, Poison has a lot of options. Toxic Tower and Toxic Slide, of course, are definitely useful and worth talking about, but the big one is Sticky Strike. You can only use it in the air, but for bosses that aren't mobile, the strong initial hit and the lingering damage add up fast. Even Poison Pommel, a close-range jab attack, has its uses. You see a lot of Poison's kit here, which is a nice change of pace compared to only seeing the dash attack in the main game and still not being very good. Poison's no top tier superstar for either of the arena modes, but overall, it's really good. Unfortunately, Poison was not meant to last. 2 years after Planet Robobot, Star Allies was released, and Water had returned in Poison's place. And yikes, are things tough for Water in this game. So many more abilities have options for moving around, and the levels themselves are much larger. This was bound to happen with Star Allies being a console game, but what this means for Water is that there are a lot more areas where you need to move up quickly. And as we already went over, Water just doesn't have that at all. Some potential good news, though, is that, due to the piggybacking mechanic, you can theoretically band-aid Water's verticality problem with a friend, such as Birdon, which is Wing, or a Meta Knight. Unfortunately, that's all it is, a band-aid fix. You can do this with any ability, including ones that are strictly better than Water. Offensive juggernauts like Hammer and Bomb benefit much more than abilities that deal reasonable damage like Water. And remember, unlike Poison, Water doesn't have attacks that linger, or at the very least, to the extent that Poison did. This isn't even beginning to mention things like Sizzle, Meta Knight. In this game, Water it can't keep up. But not all hope is lost, since Water isn't an ability you give elements to, it's an ability that gives an element. Remember, the splash element exists. And, oh, it's the worst element in the game, okay? How about that? Splash doesn't really do anything that none of the other elements can already do, aside from solving some specific puzzles. Star Allies is just not a good look for Water. Lucky for Water, it won the Spotlight vote after Kirby Fighters 2 was released. It has one final shot to be good again, and Water's good. As in, there are top players that think it's the best in the entire game. Water has a lot of perks that make it really good for a platform fighter like this. For example, that dash and the attack that comes out if you turn around, both of those are still here, and they work just like they do in the main series. This makes approaching Water a lot more difficult and can even lead into conversions if you're really on point. Water's pressure game on all fronts is really scary. Water's dash attack is back in full force, being a very strong tool for both leading into a combo and a cross-up. Its damage isn't quite on Poison's level, but it was still one of the stronger abilities in Return to Dreamland, and even some of its weaker attacks like the wave attack are really annoying to deal with for a lot of the other abilities. But up close, hooey howdy, is it even crazier! So many options that force the opponent to block or react in a way that gives Water ample time to punish. Concerning tournament results, Water has them. In particular, the currently #1 ranked player in the world uses Water. All of the footage has been from him, but there are plenty of other Water players that play the game. It isn't a perfect ability. If you can play Keep Away, Water is forced to approach, for example. And that's not the biggest deal since Water has good approach options, but taking away part of what makes it so great does hurt. It's easily in the running for the best ability in the game, though. Don't try to think otherwise, because it is. And that's that. After 4 games, we are done. How has Water been in the games that it's been in? Well, for Water, it's kind of difficult to say. Even though it's only been in 3 games and it's not perfect in those, overall, it was a pretty great ability. It's underwhelming in Star Allies, not being very good in any regard, but in its other 2 appearances, it was a dominating ability. While only okay for the arena modes, it is one of the few abilities able to stand out in the main game for Return to Dreamland. And in Kirby Fighters 2, it stands out as one of, if not the, best abilities in the entire game. Adding Poison into the mix, it's a reverse of how Water worked in Return to Dreamland. There's nothing for it to do in the main game, but against the bosses, it uses Planet Robobot's lack of boss invincibility to be great for taking them down. I know the video wasn't 55 minutes like the Fire Spotlight, but still, overall, Water was pretty great. And believe me, not all of them can be 55 minutes. None of the others are probably going to be 55 minutes.